I'm so excited to dive into our topic. This is our pre-symposium panel. So this is the lead up to our executive symposium on December 4th in the DFW area. The topic of our upcoming executive symposium is how to drive strategic change in an organization. And so what we do in our pre-symposium panels is we bring leaders who are going to be at our upcoming executive symposium together in a virtual environment like this to share our thoughts on what we found to be an effective way to drive strategic change in an organization, as well as maybe mistakes we made en route to trying to drive strategic change in an organization and what lessons we've learned from doing so. Ultimately, our goal is to drive knowledge, to drive insight, and just ultimately create a space for us as leaders and executives to come together and share our thoughts and perspectives and more or less be able to learn from each other because we know that being in an executive role can be a lonely place sometimes. So we've got three great leaders who are going to be at our upcoming executive symposium on December 4th with us today. We've got Elizabeth, we've got Coleman, and we've got Tony. Elizabeth, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Davis. I'm Chief Growth Officer for Impact Data in DFW area. I am leading change internally and externally, helping change the way CPAs and advisors serve their client base. Long history of running change inside of organizations.
Very cool. Coleman, how about you?
My name is Coleman Jackson, and I'm the attorney in charge at Coleman Jackson Professional Corporation. We are a tax, business, and immigration law firm based in Dallas, Texas. Have been practicing law for over 35 years. And thank you, Gary, for the invitation to be on this panel with Elizabeth and Tony. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And then Tony, how about you?
Tony Caesar, longtime CIO, longer than I care to admit. I've worked in CPG, telecommunications, manufacturing, a broad base of different kind of industries. I predominantly spent the last 15 years here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Last company I worked for was Ericsson, which is a big telecommunications organization. And now, here starting on my own thing. So, Garrett, thank you for inviting me to this panel.
My pleasure. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder and CEO of Ambition in Motion. At Ambition in Motion, our vision's a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they are there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves for their teams. And one of the ways that we build community is by having these executive symposiums. So let's dive in. Topic for today: how to drive strategic change in an organization. One of the biggest things that I'm seeing a lot of organizations go through right now is this transition from kind of like scrappy startup to more established business where processes and procedures start to get in place. And there's a lot of growing pains that come with that because ultimately the things that made you really successful in the early days, that being very action oriented, type A personality, jump right in, self-starter, people who don't need help, they just see a problem and solve it. But the issue you encounter is when you've got 50 different ways to do one activity and you bring on new employees and you're like, hey, you're going to get trained by Joe today. Oh, Joe's on vacation. You're going to get trained by Shelby now. And Joe and Shelby have very different ways of doing the exact same task. It becomes very hard to onboard any new employee. And that's just one example. But the point I'm getting at is that there's a lot of growing pains when transitioning from like young, entrepreneurial, scrappy, all hands on deck to like processes, efficiency, trying to drive profitability. And so I would love to kick off with an initial question of when it comes to driving strategic change in an organization, especially one that is making that transition from like young, scrappy startup to more established business, what are some of the biggest hurdles you've encountered or you've seen organizations encounter when getting that buy-in to making those changes? Who wants to kick off with this first question?
I'll jump in. Couple things. First and foremost, culture plays a big part, right? If you're coming from an organization that's startup mode, startup mentality, everyone's going out and no roadblocks, just get it done, no rules to follow, so to speak. That's one organization, right? And a lot of startups, they really need that to really get going. Now you want to transition into this kind of more mature organization, right? And you talk about, change management. right? Because the company's taking on a different form, right? And now we want to move into this kind of growth mode, right? So we're not in this startup mode anymore. We're in a mature mode. So first we've got to get everyone on the team aligned that we're no longer startup. We can't behave like we're startup, right? There's rules, there's governance, there's compliance, all those yucky words that people don't like to hear. They're like, that's just slowing us down, right? You're saying you're just throwing up more hurdles, right? But those hurdles are important as you become a more mature organization. And then the other thing, and I'll pass it to what my other two panelists. You got to have some sort of strategic buy-in from the top down, right? It can't happen in individual silos. I've seen that, and those are where disaster happens, right? There has to be strategic alignment from the top down, where everybody's kind of marching to the same beat. Because if there isn't, you've got this group doing this thing, and that group doing that thing, and that group doing that thing, and no one orchestrating it to make sure it's all driving towards whatever the overall goal is.
Let's go next.
I'll pick up from there. Like I said earlier, I'm an attorney at Coleman Jackson Professional Corporation. I'm also a CPA, and I find that those two combinations give me a unique focus. And I think that you drive strategic growth through knowing your niche, knowing your client, and knowing your market. What I mean by that is that everyone has gifts and talents. You have to know yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses. You have to know what you're going to offer the marketplace. So you have to know the market, you have to know yourself, your niche, and you need to know your client. And it's all relational based in terms of your staffing, so even a startup to growing it, you need a plan from the very beginning. You need to know what are you bringing to the market. For example, our focus is on business, on immigration, on taxes. That's not by accident. I started my career with an international CPA firm. And then I went into law school. And the combination has stayed with me and stayed with my law firm. We bring international business entrepreneurs to the United States through business visas. We handle their tax issues, and usually we'll start with a small project, but we have a long-term relationship goal with our clients. We need to know our market. So we put out podcasts. We do things like this because we have to know who our client base or potential client base is. So it's knowing your niche or yourself, your business self, knowing your client, relational. If clients think you care about them, they're likely to hire you to do additional things for them.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, how about you? What do you think about
Yeah,
that?
I was going to build on what Tony and Coleman said. I'm a big fan of a plan, but I always like to start with why. And keep in mind, just like Coleman was saying, like who is my audience? Could be internal. A lot of times it's I'm having to sell internally. So I need to have a good story about where we're going, where we're heading to get the buy-in. And then we can figure out what's the plan to back that up and get the buy-in. And keep in mind, we have to have like the people who are more engaged by the story, the excitement, and then you have the people who say, okay, that's great, but I need the KPIs behind it too, so that you're engaging the two different type of people. So we have the numbers to back up where we're going, and then we can do tools and put a plan in place and say, this is where we're going to go. And keep in mind, it's a hypothesis. We have to adjust as we're going along.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I'm so glad that you bring that up. You know, Elizabeth and Tony, I really like what you're saying here because you're kind of talking about this interesting concept of like starting with why, having the KPIs and hypotheses, but also the culture. In Tony, I want to start with you because you brought up this really key point of alignment. And one thing I think often happens is there's just a lot of strong personalities, especially in the C-suite team and on the executive level, where, somebody, let's say the CEO says, hey, we need to make the transition from scrappy startup to more of an established organization. Is everyone in agreement? And everyone says, like, oh yeah, for sure, we're all in agreement. And then they continue to behave in ways that are more scrappy startup and less, process oriented. And even though you've agreed upon the direction of your going, and even maybe you've agreed upon the actual action they said they're going to take, sometimes I feel like there's a big misstep in this kind of concept of how do you go about actually getting everybody truly bought in? Where, where do you see like the biggest transition from like the mental state of like, oh yeah, for sure, boss, whatever you say, to like actually like, oh yeah, I see why we would need to want to set up these processes and systems in place for how to handle this sort of stuff.
Elizabeth and Jack Coleman both hit one of the key things, a plan, right? Because more often than not, you're sitting in the boardroom or a conference room, and our CEO says we want to do X, right? And everyone, by their very nature, everyone shakes their head, right? The boss is always right. We say yes, yes, we're gonna do it, right? Um, but then it's almost like you're in a huddle, right? And the quarterback, without telling you the play, just says, hey, we're going to score a touchdown. Everybody in the huddle says, yep, yep, well, ready, break, right? Well, we all go on the line and, well, nobody told us what the play was. So how are we going to score this touchdown if we don't know the play, right? So I think sometimes what happens is between the CEO or whoever's in leadership making a statement and everyone around the table going, yes, we agree, this is our goal. It's really the formation of that plan of how do we reach those goals and then how do we measure. Again, Elizabeth talked about KPIs. Could be financial KPIs, could be internal KPIs, right? From go to step A to step B to step C to step C. And then the biggest piece, the biggest piece that's always missed is getting the rank and file on board, right? Because you, Elizabeth, Coleman as leaders, we operate at 50,000 feet sometimes, right? And I always say that the best leader is the one that knows that he or she's not the smartest in the room, right? That there are a lot of other people that are really smarter than you. And sometimes those are people that work for you, right? And the people that work for them. And if they're not on board with all of this stuff that you're talking about, right? And there's no cohesive plan, cohesive messaging, that's where you start running into a lot of difficulties. So hopefully I answered your question, Gary.
Yeah. Well, it leads me back to the KPIs part that Elizabeth brought up because like getting into the details is
Mhm.
something that I think like, especially if you're a CEO, you're like, I'm a visionary. I like come up with an idea. We're gonna march in this direction and everybody heave ho, we're going. And you know, sometimes that doesn't always work. Just saying we're going in this direction doesn't it means that you have to kind of Tony to your point, you have to have people that are willing to dive into the weeds to say, cool, great, love that we're gonna score this touchdown. We're gonna run the ball. We're going to block every hat on a hat. We're gonna cover everybody. And we're gonna create a hole where our running back can run straight through into the end zone. And like I'm just following the football analogy and metaphor. But the point is that like as long as everybody's on the same page as to what direction you're running, that's huge. But I think so often the misstep is the CEO says, "Hey, we're going into this." And then maybe that CEO doesn't have a right hand person to just be like,
Mm.
well, I'm going to organize this for you. So then we have an action plan set up in place. Elizabeth, have you ever seen scenarios like that? How do you, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, actually, absolutely. I was going to say there's like three personalities I've found that you really need to make a big strategic change successful. You need a practitioner who's going to do the work, who's going to do the experimentation, who's going to bring it back and say, "Hey, we tried this, it didn't quite work. We need to tweak it." Whether it's the messaging or you need a P&L owner. I'm sure Coleman, you appreciate this, CPA. Like someone needs to make sure you're not running over your budget, whether it's scrappy no budget or you're putting technology in place and using consultants. Like you need to have some responsibility there. And then you need like somebody has got to be taking the visionary and putting it on paper. Like it has to go on paper. operations. Right now, I have the most amazing operations person that I'm working with. And it just makes everyone's life so much easier. You don't want that to be me. It's been me before in different roles because I had to be that person, but that's not my best suited space. I think probably anyone who's been in leadership has had to put on a hat that wasn't their best suit just to get the job done. But I think that's it, right? Like somebody has to step up and be the documentarian as we move along if we're trying to get change in. And then you have to keep getting the buy-in and the bolstering the troops around it. So.
Coleman, Tony, anything to add to what Elizabeth was saying or comment on?
That's Coleman.
Yes, absolutely. My perspective in my law firm is working with small and medium-sized businesses. And that has been intentional. First of all, most Americans work for small and medium-sized businesses, not the large corporations. And most jobs are created by small and medium-sized businesses. So that has been intentional on my part to come alongside small and medium-sized businesses, and particularly businesses started and run by immigrants. And so adaptability is a very important ingredient in, besides the relational aspect of things. You have to have a relational perspective to get this corporate buy-in or this business buy-in from that Tony was talking about, and is even more important in small and medium-sized businesses to get your team together. You have to have a team approach. And sure, a visionary is always necessary. Like in our law firm, that vision is established pretty much by me, but we have ongoing meetings with our team, and we go over and over and over again the vision of our law firm. Tax law, business law, immigration law. We represent clients from around the world, type of thing. And so the same thing applies to our clients. We want to know who our clients is, what their vision is, what their goal is. And usually always there's a visionary in that business that started that business. So it's working, and it's being adaptive and learning. And you're after unity within your organization. Any organization is stronger with unity, obviously, than disunity. And it's intentional driving towards that to drive strategic growth. Your whole team must buy in. I think Tony mentioned it, but you're talking from the big corporation perspective. Our law firm specifically focuses on small and medium-sized businesses. That's where most people live.
Yeah. I was going to say, I wanted to piggyback on that and talk about like setting up an operational cadence, whether you're consulting with another firm, helping them go through their change, or it's your own internal change. Like we need to have a regular touch point where we talk about what's working, what's not working. Something I do with my own teams internally is, okay, every week, one lesson learned, so that we're making sure that we share, because it's so easy to get stuck in your day-to-day, especially when you're wearing your regular hat, you're driving change on top of that. So you're working a lot of hours, and then you can forget to give the feedback to the rest of the team or the rest of the people about like, what did we learn this week? What's working? What's not working? And can we quickly, someone come together and say, oh, I've got an idea, or I tried something else and this worked with, this piece of my puzzle. So.
But to Coleman's point on size, and size matters in terms of, hey, he's working with small to medium-sized businesses. It's a smaller container of people versus you're working in a large to medium-sized enterprise, right? In Coleman's example, everyone is probably a little bit more aware of what's happening because they're smaller groups, right? And he is the leader, right? He says over and over, he's got all the right people around the table. Everyone knows messaging, everyone knows the goals, Everyone knows that, hey, the client is the most important thing. Here's my expectation about how we treat our clients. So we get that feedback back from them, and it's going back and forth this way, right? Probably a little bit easier than in a multi-million dollar, larger enterprise organization where you're disparate, right? You're all over the place, right? You got leaders who have their own factions, so to speak, right? And running their own things, right? And it's sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to bring all of that, I would say, organization, Coleman, that you get from a smaller team. And even Elizabeth, you were mentioning, we as leaders, we keep our teams up to date, right? We're making sure that the people in our direct reports and down, they're aware of what's happening. But not all leaders do that, right? Not all leaders lead that way, right? So again, your team might be up to speed on what's happening, but your team is dependent upon my team. And if my team's not up to speed on everything, you may have expectations of me, and I'm going, sorry, can't give you that because I didn't get the memo, so to speak, right? So it is much harder in larger organizations, but the trick is it's people, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Whether it's a small organization or a larger organization, it's not automatic.
Yeah, yeah.
It has to be intentional.
Yeah.
And it's about, again, knowing the people that you recruit. In the interviewing in our instance, is like the students that we bring in for law clerks, the lawyers we have for associates. We have to talk to them to find out what motivates them and whether it fits with where we think our organization wants to be in reaching small and medium-sized businesses and individual homes in the areas of law we practice. So all of this is intentional. It's not, it's adaptive. It's not automatic that you create a unified team. You have to work on that every day. Like Elizabeth says, they get feedback, and you can have management styles that stifle, and like you said, Tony, the smartest person in the room.
So,
To the detriment of strategic growth.
Tony, I'm really intrigued with something you were talking about before of, you're talking about like, well, this team might be relying on this team, and if they didn't get the memo, then they might not follow through. And one of the things that I think it kind of dovetails back into a little bit of like, what Elizabeth was saying was like, you have to have a practitioner, you have to have a P&L owner, you have to have a visionary on paper. But one of the things that I'm seeing right now with a lot of organizations is there's, especially for like private equity backed organizations, there's a big push for efficiency. It's efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. If you can find a way to use AI, cut some employees, efficiency. Or, hey, it used to take us 10 employees to do this thing. Let's try to get it done with 6. I'm seeing that in so many organizations across the board, from medium-sized businesses, small businesses, and obviously a lot of large businesses too. And so where does innovation fall on this, P&L line, and how does being able to see a new picture for what could be possible exist? And when I ask that question, I think like sometimes the reason why it pertains, at least Tony, to like what you were saying before of, oh, I didn't get the full memo, or, oh, we've never historically been able to achieve these results in this fashion, so I can't deliver what you need in the time that you need it because we've never been able to effectively achieve that. And so there's kind of like this, I don't want to say a passive aggressive top-down communication style that I see a lot of organizations do, but I see a lot of CEOs say like, cool, we're going to go out and do this thing. You're going to get it done with these efficiency metrics. Go ahead and make it happen. And you're like, cool, where am I going to find this innovation? What's going to happen? I think some teams are able to figure it out. Some teams are not, but are there any tips or tricks in like how to effectively communicate that across teams and set expectations both up and across?
I'll take 2 seconds on that. Being the IT leader for all these companies for my entire career, we've always been kind of the center of whether it's the knives are being thrown at the bullseye or the ones that are supposedly creating the innovation vision. What I think is happening, especially with the advent of AI, and AI is moving at a pace that's so fast. I mean, you can't even wrap your head around it, right? There is an expectation by companies that, yes, we're going to adopt this technology and we're going to become more efficient overnight. We're going to be able to cut heads because it's a headcount game, right? Because, hey, if I'm not growing revenue, if I'm not growing top line, the only other way I'm going to make my numbers is taking costs out of the business, right? And what's your biggest cost? People, right? So if I can leverage new technologies, gain greater efficiencies by utilizing this technology, and oh, by the way, reduce my headcount from a business perspective, that's a win-win. But so now the question is, which technology, going back to your original question, Garrett, about change management, right? As part of this change management structure and with framework, we're looking, okay, so which is the right technology do we invest in? Is it something on the sales side? Is it something on the distribution side? Is it something in the financial side, right? Do we do something to improve our time to close the books? Do we somehow automate some processes or bring some new processes that makes us more efficient? Do we go away from traditional, I call dashboards, into more agentic type Q&A, and we can see value there? So I don't think anybody's figured that out yet. I certainly haven't. And maybe Elizabeth and Coleman, maybe you figured it out. But I can definitely tell you that the next 2 years, maybe less, all of the discussions we're going to be having around change management, Garrett, AI is going to be at the tip of the spear of those discussions, 100%. Even if you're from a startup or a long-term, like Coleman's organization that's been around for 25, 30, 100 years, everyone's talking about how do we become more efficient with this technology. And whether it's agentic, it's generative, we don't know. Everyone's throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
I can talk. I've been speaking about AI for a little while and how it's changing in the CPA space. And when you go from, I'll just talk about like CPA, where you're talking about time and billing. And now all of a sudden you have this giant disruptor, which is AI, and I can do things much more efficiently. I can close the books. I can do my research. I can cut down that time. So we have to move away from, just exactly like last year, Jelly, the way we've always done things, to adding value in other areas specifically. So like we're adding more I'm sure it's the same thing for Coleman. Like you get to lean in and have deeper conversations about where your clients want to go, whether it's internal, your employees. Hopefully you get to have more time to really invest in them, or your clients, external, so that you're adding value in that way, as opposed to the rote transactional stuff that you used to do. And so I've seen that disruption happen a lot. But I think, like, how do you get the adoption? Is you find like, whether it's your 20% or your 15% of your employees, and you have them give it a try. Like, where is our proof of delivery, our lighthouse? Like, let's get a quick win, as opposed to getting everyone on board, because that's never going to happen. We get a quick win, whether it's a cool technology like Blue Jay, which does tax research, right? I don't know, Coleman, if you've used it, it's really cool. Or another technology like that. It's like and then bring the story back, bring it back to the team and say, wow, this thing used to take me 6 hours and now it takes me 6 minutes. And I've got all this other time to add more value to the organization in a more meaningful way. So it's just doing those sorts of things. Or, I can now focus on these things that I never used to get to. That's what I've seen work.
So, okay, here's an interesting thing that I'm thinking about now, Elizabeth. You're bringing up this really interesting point, and Tony, you talked about this earlier about like rank and file employees and like getting everybody in the organization, from the individual contributor to middle managers. That's going to be the catalyst for adopting this change anyways. And Elizabeth, you're talking about this concept of like, oh, cool, I need to find my 15 to 20% of early adopters, the people that are willing to take on a new technology or a new initiative or whatever it is and like run with it. But I almost feel like there's this false sense of hubris that maybe a lot of employees have about their job security. almost like, I'm going to be resistant to this change because you need me and you can't live without me. And I'm critical to this entire process and I know all these things. And like without me, there's no knowledge base and you'll never be able to live without me. And I say this, I'm saying this tongue in cheek, but I think there's a lot of employees out there. I guess where I'm trying to go is
There's a lot of truth to that as well.
Yeah.
it's
I
true
mean,
for sure.
one
I mean,
thing
yeah, hence,
AI doesn't have is judgment. And human beings have a judgment and adaptability. We have more, it's more to our interaction with each other than logic. And AI and a lot of judges in the legal profession as well as all professions, AI is making a mock. It's making a move. But a lot of judges is holding counsel accountable for errors when they rely on AI without exercising judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So AI is not human beings, and this individual, Garrett, that are saying that this operation needs them. There's a lot of truth to that. They may have expertise that judgment needs to be, especially in the professions, but in most professions, in most areas, we're exercising judgment. There is no set answer to a lot of problems, and you have to exercise judgment to get to the right place. So, so that's what I would add to that. We're using AI in legal research, drafting documents, but still, you need to be the lawyer.
I totally agree with you. I don't disagree with the concept that AI can't replace the logic that a human can possess. But where I'm going with this is that when I say a false sense of hubris is sometimes it manifests itself with, I'm not going to adopt this change because I'm too critical to the organization. And so therefore, like, I don't care what, technology you want to implement. I'm not going to use it or I'm not going to buy in or I'm going to be a stick in the mud when it comes to trying to implement these sorts of things. And, yeah, ultimately, how can we go about kind of not necessarily, I'm not saying fear mongering, but like painting a picture of the reality of like, hey, like, really would love your support in this new change initiative because it'll help us paint a picture for the future. And we'd love for you to be a part of this instead of the last person to like, get off the boat. The Titanic is sinking. Let's move to a new direction. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
Some people will lose their jobs. I mean, it is
Yep.
what it is. Let's just call it what it is, right? So no need to fake. There will be others that will have to retool the way they think, the way they work, right? And it's the ones that retool that figures out how do I become the AI expert, subject matter expert, right? Whatever the AI is that we're using, how do I be a subject matter expert of that so that, yes, to your point, Coleman, knowledge workers are important, but companies right now, they're making decisions based on dollars and cents. And it's not all about the knowledge worker, right? Because, hey, think about it. Any one of us, myself included, you can be gone tomorrow. You think you're important. And at the end of the week, someone else is sitting in your seat and they're figuring it out, right? And AI is just accelerating that, right? So I do believe that there'll be pockets, maybe like from your point, Coleman, in the legal lawyers and judges, there'll be a little bit more resistance about bringing in artificial intelligence. But corporate America, oh my goodness, they're wide open. Bring it on, right? And jobs and people are going to be affected, right? And if you're smart, right? And again, hopefully we're all smart, we'll figure out, hey, how do I get a certification program? How do I go online and take a Google training class? How do I go and get myself retooled so that my job that I'm doing today may become obsolete, but I'm now in a better position to take on a new job, one that leverages AI.
Well, the whole thing is, it's not that this is all true or all false.
Yeah.
I mean, it's AI is like the is continuation of the industrial revolution. I mean, we're not riding horse and buggies down the road. There may have been people that were driving horse and buggies down the road, and they were reluctant to change.
Yep.
And they were eventually convinced to change, or change encircled them. So AI, I'm just simply saying, we need to communicate within the organizations or the spheres that we have power to alleviate the fear of workers losing their jobs and losing pace and falling behind. And leaders lead that way. You don't just say, well, you're going to be out of a job. I mean, some people are going to have to be handheld to retooling themselves. And there needs to be, being a lawyer, there needs to be laws structured around these changes. You just can't throw people to the side and say, get with the change, or you're out of work and you're a drag on society. People have value. We need to
That's what's happening. I think the point Tony's making, Coleman, is like at the end of the day, you know, what was it? Amazon laid off like however many thousand white collar workers from their corporate offices to replace it with AI. Like at the end of the day, for better or for worse, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just what's happening. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, you know, because if as an organization we envision a strong future with these employees that are on our team, but they need to be open to the buy-in. I can't handhold you through this change. I need you to at least be willing to jump in the pool yourself. Like, if you're not willing to do that, there are other people that are willing to jump into the pool and give it a shot. I'm just creating weird metaphors. I don't know why, but yeah, it's all I'm trying to get at with this is like, hey, if I have to like pull you kicking and screaming, I might say this effort isn't worth it. And so I'm going to find someone who's willing to adopt this and not make a big stink about it because, you know, the way they did something 5, 10 years ago, they were elite at it, but that elite skill is not an elite skill anymore. Unfortunately, it's just not as valued in the eyes of the organization.
Yeah, but we can lead people through change.
Yeah.
That marks a good leader.
Absolutely.
Most people.
Yeah,
Most
Yeah,
people.
well, that's, I would say this is
Most-
the reason why
most
this is the
people.
topic of the symposium, is that it's not always easy. No, Elizabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it comes back to being a marketer for change, basically. It's to take the measurements, to narrate the story, to celebrate the wins, and then go back to the coaching and sitting side by side to the people who have value but are struggling and help bring them along. And then if they don't want to come along, either there's other people who will get on the bus and go down the road with us, or maybe we find someone else to get them on board if we know they have value, but our message isn't coming through. You can use AI for that, by the way. ChatGPT, if you're struggling to get an argument through, can help you personality shift to say, like, how do I get through to this person I've been struggling with? But yeah, and then again, like not everybody's gonna go on the journey with us. And I think as leaders, you have to be okay with that. Like you can only do so much. It just comes back. We were talking about being parents before we got on the call. Like I can only do so much for you. And then at some point you have to, do yourself.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, everybody, Elizabeth, Coleman, Tony, this has been a really good pre-symposium panel. I'm glad that we could dive into this. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to our executive symposium. I'll post in the comments of this video where to RSVP. But anyways, Elizabeth, Coleman, Tony, thank you for your time today. This was great. I look forward to seeing you all in exactly a month from today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody.